Welcome, everybody. If you're a veteran of our webinars, welcome back. If this is your first Zoom with ZOA webinar, I expect you'll find the next hour to be quite informative. Today's program is entitled Rising Lion, Iran, Past, Present, and Future, an Expert Analysis, and features panelists Lisa Daftari and Ali Meli, whom we'll probably introduce in just a few minutes. Here's the plan for today. We'll hear opening remarks from our panelists, after which we'll field Q&A. All microphones will remain muted during the webinar. Please post questions in the Zoom Q&A feature only, as we will not be monitoring the chat for questions. We will not get to all questions, so in advance, please do not be offended if your question is not asked. I'm truly blessed to come to work every day to support the mission of this amazing organization. Our weapon is the truth. Our modality is education. In the media, in government, in the courts, on university campuses, and in K through 12, ZOA defends Israel's right to freedom, safety, and sovereignty over all of Israel's biblical homeland, including Judea and Samaria and the Jordan Valley, with all of Jerusalem as the eternal capital of the one and only Jewish state in the world. We continue to promote and foster an eternal, unbreachable bond between two of the great democracies of the world, Israel and the United States. And utilizing the same resources and through the same outlets, we tirelessly fight the evil metastatic cancer that is rampant anti-Semitism. Under the leadership of perhaps the greatest Zionist of our time, ZOA National President Mort Klein, ZOA's track record on all issues has been proven. From the farce that was the Oslo Accords to the travesty that led to the October 7th tragedy, the Gaza disengagement, and the disastrous JCPOA, Mort and ZOA have been right. ZOA has and continues to steadfastly support positions, no matter how unpopular they may be, that we know are best for Israel and the Jewish people. Before we start, please let me remind you that our work here at ZOA comes with a significant price tag, and ZOA is 100% donor funded. If you enjoyed today's program, if you learned something new today, I encourage you to visit our website, zoa.org, and generously support our work. You can always count on ZOA. Help us continue to fearlessly lead the virtuous Zionist cause. Lisa and Ali are longtime friends and collaborators of ZOA. In fact, a few years back, together we produced a video entitled No Nuclear Deal, No Nuclear Holocaust that poignantly warned the world about the prospect of a nuclear Iran. Toward the end of today's webinar, my colleague Jackie Schaefer will put a link to the video in the Zoom chat. The video is as meaningful today as it was then, and I strongly suggest that you bookmark the site and watch it. Lisa Daftari is an award-winning investigative journalist, political analyst, and commentator specializing in foreign affairs, national security, and human rights. She frequently appears on major networks, including Fox News, CNN, CBS, and NBC. Lisa is the founding editor of The Foreign Desk, a global news platform with a widely read daily briefing and an acclaimed podcast. A sought-after expert, Lisa has briefed institutions such as the United Nations and the U.S. Congress, and has contributed reports for the Pentagon and White House, including being called to help with the rollout of the Abraham Accords. Lisa holds a master's degree from USC's Annenberg School and is a Carnegie Knight Fellow and currently a PhD candidate at the Institute of World Politics. Fluent in Persian, Spanish, and English, Lisa has received numerous honors, including the Simon Wiesenthal Center's Medal of Valor and the Jewish Journal's Champion of Freedom Award. Lisa is also a trained opera singer and pianist and delivered a TED Talk on fake news in 2019. Originally from New Jersey and New York, she now lives in Los Angeles with her husband and young son. An extremely impressive resume indeed, but far more meaningful to me and my family is that we and Lisa and her wonderful family hail from the same town in New Jersey, and we have been longtime family friends. We prayed in the same synagogue, shared simchas and sorrows, and our entire community continues to watch with great pride as Lisa continues to grow and shine. That Lisa and I have had the opportunity to work together professionally is a true honor. Lisa, hello and welcome. But before we ask you for your opening remarks, I'd like to ask ZOA National President Mort Klein to say a few words and to introduce our other panelists. Mort has been the national president and leader of ZOA for more than 30 years. Mort has testified before Congress, gives talks across the country, and appears frequently in all major media. Mort appears regularly on Newsmax, is frequently published in the Jerusalem Post, the Times of Israel, JNS, and has been quoted in the New York Times and the New York Post and others. Mort regularly speaks with senators and representatives and other policymakers and world leaders. Mort has been traveling across the U.S., meeting with influential community leaders, and giving important talks and speeches about Zionism, Israel, and combating anti-Semitism. Mort is recognized the world over as one of the most influential Zionists of our time. Here to share remarks and introduce our other esteemed panelist, ZOA National President Mort Klein.
Well, thank you so much, Alan. It's an honor for me to be with two brilliant and accomplished friends like Ali Meli and Lisa Daftari. I think as we look at what has transpired in the last 2 years, one can only say it's miraculous. 2 years ago, who would have believed that it would be possible for Israel to degrade Hamas, degrade Hezbollah, degrade Iran, degrade the Houthis, and push back Iran's nuclear ambitions, likely for several years, if not more. It's a miracle from God, and it's a miracle of the Israel Defense Forces. It's really enough to make you believe that there really is a God. It's so extraordinary. To me, this is as an extraordinary achievement as the splitting of the sea. That's how miraculous I think that these last 2 years have been. So it's my special privilege to introduce my dear and brilliant friend, Ali Meli. Ali Meli is an Iranian-American. He's an activist for Middle East peace. He's the founder of Monocle Capital Partners, a private investment firm. Prior to that, he worked at Goldman Sachs as a partner for 14 years, working in their New York, London, and Hong Kong offices. Prior to that, his education is he went to advanced university in Iran, and then he came to the United States to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, where he earned degrees in engineering and in business. He has also received our distinguished Stephen Sass Award for his work on behalf of strong U.S.-Israel relations and advancing peace. He's been on all the major, many of the major business networks, Bloomberg, MSNBC, CNBC, Schwab, really an extraordinary fellow. So it's my special honor and privilege to introduce to you someone who knows the Iran situation as well as anyone that I know, Ali Meli. Ali, thank you so much.
Mort, thank you very much for having me, and it's an honor to be here with you. This is a cause that is very meaningful to me personally and to my family and to a lot of my friends. I'll start by giving a brief historical background on what has transpired in Iran over the past 100 years, and then focus narrowly on over the past few weeks and few months. Iran entered the last century being squeezed between two powers. On one side, it was Russia on the north before the communist revolution, and on the south, it was British Empire who had control of India. And that conflict essentially it resulted in Iran reaching out to United States for help and friendship. And that really starts the history of friendship between Iran and United States, where President Taft assisted Iran by sending an American advisor to help them with their finances. Actually, the first finance minister of Iran happened to be an American gentleman who helped Iranians with their finances, and that upset Russians quite a lot. They pushed hard for that gentleman to be, his name was Morgan Schuster, to be kicked out of Iran. But that symbolically was the beginning of Iranian and American friendship. And throughout the years, that friendship became deeper and deeper. After the communist revolution, the Soviets started undermining that friendship between Iran and United States. That resulted in the Islamic Revolution. It happened in multiple phases. Initially, the Soviets founded the Communist Party of Iran, and which later became the Tudeh Party in the 20s. Later on, they worked with a gentleman named Mossadegh, who was preserving or pushing forward a version of an Iranian equivalent of Jamal Abdel Nasser's Arab nationalism. And they tried to topple and undermine and essentially organize an insurrection against the Iranian government. That failed. And that started the golden era of Iran and United States and Iran and Israel friendship under King Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. For 25 years, Iran was close allies with both United States and Israel. Much of the modern, back in the day, modern Air Force of Iran was provided by United States, ranging from F-14s to F-16s, all sort of military cooperation going between the three countries, student exchanges, economic developments. Iran GDP was growing at 10% per year, which was miraculous back in the day. But all of that upset the Soviets, and Soviets and communists said, we cannot have a US ally in our southern border. So they started essentially continue to fund Marxist revolutionary groups inside Iran and also cooperate with Islamists inside Iran. And that cooperation resulted in what we know as the Islamic Revolution of '79 that caused a lot of Iranians to leave Iran, come to United States, and seek refuge here. But if you look at that trajectory, that was where suddenly Iran left the sphere of influence of United States, changed as a friend of Israel to a foe of Israel overnight, because the Ayatollahs who were collaborating with the Soviets, and they maybe had to some extent tacit support from President Carter of United States, what Soviets wanted was to turn Iran into an anti-United States and anti-Israel entity. And that was the ideology of Ayatollahs from day one. Even before the foundation, a lot of Marxist groups that were part of the revolution, one of the things that they did was harassing Persian Jews and Iranian Jews inside Iran. So what we call the Islamic Republic government or the Islamic regime inside Iran from day one, from its foundation, had an anti-Semitic characteristics. Move forward to post-JCPOA world, Islamic Republic government has been pushing for nuclear enrichment, which pretty much it's obvious to everyone that it's purely for military capabilities, doesn't really make economic sense for Iran to enrich uranium. And they also have tried to combine that with the missile program and funding of proxies. Those were the three foundations of the Iranian posture towards Israel. And October 7th was effectively a turning point for that, where Israelis rightfully concluded that essentially these people are crazy. We are not going to continue with the game of trying to guess what they are going to do. We are going to proactively dismantle that. And Operation Rising Lion was the culmination of these 45 years of hostility by Islamic Republic and Israelis taking action to defend themselves. The operations, as we know, was unqualified success for Israelis. They were able to dismantle and kill the top commanders of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is an interesting entity in and of itself. It's a military organization inside Iran. It doesn't even have the name Iran in it. It's just literally Islamic Revolution Guard Corps, and they define their mission to be eradicating Israel. Israel has been very successful. The operation was very efficient. It was initially a big propaganda win for Israel as well, because in terms of messaging, being able to kill top military, essentially commanders of IRGC, who were involved, a lot of them were also involved in torture of Iranians inside Iran with minimal civilian casualty, was a big win for Israel. Also, Israel was able to achieve all of its goals, including dismantling air defenses, reducing the Iranian missile capabilities. And after 12 days, it resulted in a ceasefire agreement. If you look at the conditions today, my personal view is that the probability of the conflict really hasn't stopped. There are what I call low-grade conflict still going on. We are hearing heads of IRGC commanders having accidents inside Iran that at least Iranians view being planned by Mossad. So that part is continuing. The other thing that I think is very obvious to me is that the Islamic government hasn't learned their lesson. They are continuing to claim victory that comes from their Shiite ideology, that no matter how badly they get defeated, they always claim that they are the victorious party and they're just begging for more war and they don't know when to stop. So that might result in a more intense round of military conflict starting at some point in the near future. And when it comes to messaging and essentially control of public opinions, the Iranian government has tried to respond by appealing to national identity on one hand, and but again, their propaganda tool has really like three prongs. One of them is relying on national identity. The other one arguing that they are victim of Israeli aggression. And the third component is going and saying that their internal failures is not the fault of Israel if there is like lack of electricity or services. And I think they are, despite having some short-term success, their propaganda is going to fail. For 45 years, they overplayed Islam and underplayed nationalism. So their appeal to nationalism is going to be viewed as very transactional. The other factor that is playing in Israel's favor is that this war doesn't have any territorial component. There is not a dispute over territory or resources. The objectives of Israel happen to be actually very common with objectives of big components or big categories of Iranian people, which is we want IRGC not to operate outside Iran. We don't want a nuclear weapon and nuclear program, and we do not want a missile program. And on the last part, the economic component, again, Israel was very successful in being very deliberate in what it's targeting. And the economic mismanagement of the Iranian government is also very apparent. So what I see in the future is to have a round 2 of this conflict, or round 3 or 4, depending on when you start counting the rounds of conflict, to flare up soon. And with the messaging of Israel having a stronger chance of success and domination over the messaging that the Islamic Republic government is going to be doing about this military conflict.
Ali, thank you so much for that insightful explanation. We'll come back with questions in just a minute. Lisa, would you take a few minutes and give your opening remarks, please?
Sure. It's an honor to be with all of you. Ali, obviously a good friend and colleague. Thank you so much for laying out the facts, something that you would think would really dominate the narrative, both in the West and in the Middle East about this current conflict, and it hasn't. I do want to dovetail a lot of my points to what Ali has laid out, but recently someone asked me, how do you see the situation? And I said, I'm both optimistic and pessimistic. Optimistic because, as Ali said, Israel has showed its military might and obvious superiority in this situation. With the pagers and the various very direct targeted hits on the IRGC personnel and the nuclear scientists and all of it. I mean, obviously, Israel's deterrence and superiority was established militarily. On the other hand, you would think that the narrative about October 7th or the various intifadas that we've had, but let's look at October 7th, obviously being the climax. You would think that a sovereign nation the size of New Jersey being attacked on multiple fronts by multiple proxies, all terrorists who have American blood on their hands, by the way, and I will get to that in a moment, attacking one sovereign state would result in getting the compassion of those here in the West, whether it's in the media, in Congress, in the universities, obviously, among influencers with millions and millions of followers, but it did just the opposite. And that is where my pessimism comes from. The fact that here in the United States, for example, that narrative has completely shifted to an anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic narrative. And before, nobody knew what the word Zionist even meant. And now, influencers are canceling, beauty influencers and actors and actresses and calling them Zios as if that is, such a strong criticism of one being, a bigot or somebody who is a supporter of genocide and all the other lies that follow. And the fact that these lies have not been rooted out since October 7th and only continue to get worse, obviously the mayoral race in New York City being something that really manifests all of that. And just, Americans, voters, the educated class, and we see who voted for him is the educated class, not understanding the threat of the extremism or the anti-American rhetoric that comes from him and his family. And that's really the next thing I want to get to is really the perspective that we all as supporters of Israel have regarding this war, this conflict here in the United States. Something that I talk about a lot, whether it's in media or in my speaking engagements, is the view that we are pro-Israel because we are Jewish or because we have some sort of tie to the story, to that narrative. I recently gave a talk to a libertarian group, mainly Christians, and one man during the Q&A came to the podium and said, as a Jew, I support Israel, and then went on to ask his question. And before answering his question, I said, why did you say as a Jew? Why didn't you say as a human being, as somebody who is logical, who understands political science, somebody who is living, breathing, and understands the facts? And really, that's what it comes down to. I mean, if we allow this fake news narrative to marginalize the supporters of Israel to only those who are either churchgoers or Jews or Israelis, that's a huge mistake, and it's a big loss for all of us. For example, the fact that America got involved in this war. There are so many, whether you go on X, social media, the news, that are calling this the Israeli war, and therefore the United States was under Bibi's thumb, and they got involved because of the pressure that these Zionists are putting on the United States and billions of dollars that we give them. I want to really correct this narrative, and really for people who do care about this, these are the important talking points, that we do not give checks to Israel out of charity. We do not support Israel because we are under the influence or spell of Bibi Netanyahu. The relationship between Israel and the United States is ironclad because it's a symbiotic relationship, and we benefit as much as Israel benefits from this relationship, and people have to understand that. This is not just Israel's war, this is America's war as well. The Iranian regime has American blood on its hands. Its proxies have American blood on their hands. Whether you look at the hostage crisis, whether you look at the 240 or so Marines that were killed in Lebanon in 1983. And since then, how many times have we been targeted and continue to be targeted by their proxies, the Houthis shooting at our assets in the Red Sea as we speak? So I think this is a very important pivot that needs to be made by those who support Israel, by those who care about this war going forward, and not to allow this to be something that is, just for Jews or just for Christians or just for evangelicals or whomever it may be. This is an infiltration campaign here in the West. And in the East, it's American blood on the hands of terrorists who not only want to see Israel off the map, they also want to see Americans dead. From day one, this regime came in and they swore to eliminate the big Satan, which was the United States, and its Zionist project, the little Satan, which is Israel. And we have to remember that narrative and correct it where we can. The last thing I want to touch upon, and it kind of segues nicely here, is this infiltration campaign. And it doesn't just stop with the narrative about this war. It has seeped seeped into many sectors. Obviously, our universities, not just the encampments, but when you go inside those classrooms, I actually had a front row seat at the jihadification of America. I was a Middle Eastern Studies major at Rutgers University, also known as Jihad University. It was where I saw what we're watching right now happen on college campuses. I saw this happen almost 20 years ago, and it's only gotten worse since. People in the Middle Eastern Studies department completely compromised, completely shifting the narrative. The students threatening the teachers when they spoke about Israel in a perhaps neutral or even positive way. Of course, after 9/11, we saw a lot of that come to light, but it quickly was kind of fizzled out, and then we saw it obviously in a much more exaggerated way after October 7th. So we're seeing it in our universities, we're seeing it in the halls of Congress as members of Congress not only defend these proxy wars against Israel, not only defend Hamas, but also the Iran regime. They do everything in their power to act as basically voice pieces for Iran's regime. We see also the lobbies that have access to the White House. We look at the pro-Iran lobby in the United States that not only is a political lobby, but now has a media arm and a think tank arm. They have access to U.S. presidents. Thankfully, not under this administration. They're a bit more careful. And of course, the media completely compromised with the narrative. So I encourage everyone to go a bit deeper, to not only look at anti-Semitism, but also anti-Americanism. That's where we can get more partners on this, because it is not just a threat for Israel. It is a major threat. And going forward, this will not, the war in the Middle East will end before the war ends here in the United States. And that is the war for hearts and minds that has climaxed so exaggeratedly in the last 2 years since October 7th, but is something that we must root out, call out, and get ahead of.
Lisa, thank you so much. That was very insightful. Mort, do you have questions and comments that you'd like to ask of Ali and/or Lisa?
Well, thank you for two really fabulous descriptions of what is going on in Iran. I've certainly learned quite a bit. I appreciate it. I might add, you mentioned Rutgers, Lisa. ZOA sued Rutgers under Title VI for their harassment and discrimination against Jewish students. Just like we've sued Duke University, UNC, public high schools, many other places. And I might add, ZOA alone launched a 6-year campaign to change Title VI to cover Jews. It never covered Jews. We begged other organizations to help us, to be involved, to try and make this important change. They refused. And we accomplished this on our own. Every lawsuit you read about against the University of Harvard and Berkeley, wherever, without ZOA having changed Title VI to cover Jews, none of these lawsuits would have been possible. And that's really the uniqueness of ZOA. I might add, I was just in Israel with all the heads of organizations. And Michael Oren came to speak to us, the former ambassador from Israel to the United States. He gave a speech. He asked for questions. I raised my hand. He said, Mort, before you ask your question, I want everyone in here to know that I'm going to acknowledge the fact that you and ZOA have been right about everything. Michael Oren, a liberal labor guy, has said this in front of all the other organizations. My question really is, what do you think about the fact that after 12 days, the American administration, I think more than anyone else, urged this ceasefire? Do you agree with this ceasefire after 12 days or not? Do you think it is critically important to eliminate this regime with respect to what's important for Israel and the world? Or can it just remain this way? Should Israel and America be working to destroy the regime? Or should they strengthen citizens groups to motivate them to work to destroy this terrible Islamic Nazi-like regime?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that?
Are you asking me?
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Lisa, you go first.
Okay, so I think the one thing that Israel has learned in its 6 years of existence is that its wars cannot be micromanaged or dictated by anyone but Israel. I think the 12 days was premature. I think I should say all three parties, the United States, Israel, and the regime, wanted it to end, and they actually wanted to see this not escalate. But Israel had a different agenda. This was a defensive war. They need to eliminate the existential threat. And to your question about should this regime stay or should it go, the definition of this very regime is to have its nuclear weapons, to have its cyber military, to have its besiege, to pour acid on the faces of innocent girls, to beat to death those women who show just a little bit of hair. That is the way they stay in power. That is the definition of their existence. And I want to remind everyone that they are not suicidal. They're sadistic. So they will do whatever it takes, including killing their own, to stay in power. And I think the issue we have here in the West, and I wrote an op-ed on this entitled, "Not All Regime Changes Are Created Equal." Here in the West, particularly under Republican administrations, there is a PTSD about regime change because of our failures in Afghanistan and Iraq, perhaps Libya. Anytime we got involved and we didn't see it through because we didn't really have a plan. And so, yes, the vacuum that we created made the situation worse. Iran's regime and the Iranian people do not fit inside of that calculation. The Iranian people, they want democracy, they want freedom. I want to remind people that the original Arab Spring, they're not Arab, they're Iranian, but it kind of was inspired by the 2009 Green Revolution. The Iranian people are the first freedom fighters in the Middle East to say, hey, wait a minute, this is not a regime that fits us. We want our actual freedoms and we want this regime gone. So I think it is a loss of an opportunity for the American administration, whomever that might be, left, right, or center, to lose the opportunity to work with an ally of 90 million people, the majority of whom do not want this regime. I think if we truly want to see a stable, peaceful Middle East, then this regime has to go.
Ali, do you have any thoughts on that question?
Sure. I also think that the ceasefire after 12 days was premature. And I think I would just maybe have some level of empathy for the Western administration and President Trump on that front. Reason being that they might not be familiar with the depth of Shiite irrationality. It is, to me, like you do need to go and eliminate them and not just let them exist in a weak state, because if they exist, no matter how weak, they will always claim victory, and they would only say that the reason that they were not victorious the last time to the end is because they were not fighting harder. That's the mentality of the Shiite, essentially clergy that run Iran. And maybe to a Western rational mind, that's not understandable. But it's the same ideology that creates suicide bombers. So to some extent, maybe they needed to try, but I think soon they will learn their lesson that if the goal is to stop enrichment, and if the goal is to stop the missile program, and if the goal is to stop the proxies, let's say those are the three objectives of Israel and United States, they would realize that they cannot achieve that with this current regime in Iran. It's very clear. Today was the second time that the supreme leader of Iran was giving a sermon, and in his speech, his mindset is we should just keep fighting harder.
Thank you. Mort, do you have any other questions for right now, or should I go to questions from the...
Let's go to questions from the audience.
Great. So there are a couple of questions coming in. Lisa, maybe you take the first one. The still embedded Jewish community in Iran, are they being targeted by the Iran government?
Yes. So there are just under 10,000 Jews left in Iran. They have made the choice to stay there. Many of them have assimilated. Many of them have not, and they continue to practice Judaism and live kind of a double life, right? Wearing, hijab and continuing to adhere to Sharia law the way that you have to if you live under this regime. They have specifically been targeted after the 12-day conflict, many of them being accused of being Mossad agents. And also, I might add that there are also non-Jews, Iranians who are secular or Baha'i or Christian or Muslim who are being targeted as well. And the trumped up charge is that they are all Israeli agents. That has always been the case, but obviously more so. We know for a fact, and this was a debate inside the Jewish community, particularly here in Los Angeles, whether to publicize these cases or not, because the fear has always been over the last 46 years that if you publicize these cases against the Jewish community in Iran, that there will be a further backlash against the community. So in order to keep them safe, the stories are kept, insular and not exposed or taken to the mainstream media. We do know for a fact that many of these families where their homes were invaded, a lot of their cell phones were confiscated, a lot of their laptops were confiscated to see if in fact they were working together with the Israeli government. And many of them were made into symbols. Do not work with the Israeli government or this is what will happen to you. And these communities were in fact targeted.
Thank you for that. Ali, maybe you'll take this and I'm going to aggregate a couple of questions into one. What is the Iranian influence over American groups? And maybe you can speak to the groups in general, like the National Iranian American Council and the Quincy Institute. And what are the influences of the Iranian government now on those?
I would say that they work closely in coordinating messages. There is evidence, significant evidence, that their messaging is identical to Iranian government messaging, whether it's NIAC and whether it's Quincy. And the head of Quincy Institute was the former head of NIAC that resigned from NIAC after his ties to the Iranian government was discovered. So I would say there is ample evidence that both of these organizations are de facto foreign lobbyists that represents the interest of the Iranian government. And I think in an ideal world, maybe it is worthwhile for the Justice Department to look into the foreign lobbying and foreign influence by the Iranian government. And, you can see from their messaging that they want to claim that there is this moderate faction within the Iranian government, which, by the way, what they mean by moderate faction of the Iranian government are close friends of the previous Ayatollah, who are no longer in the circle of power with the current Ayatollah. So they call them moderates only because they are not all the way in. But, they have essentially, JCPOA was facilitated by NIAC. They do run influence campaigns on Capitol Hill. I would say the senator from my state of Connecticut, which is Chris Murphy, is heavily under influence of that Iranian influence groups. And you can see that they have been fomenting that merge of Marxism ideology with Islamism and Shiitism, which was initially sponsored by Soviets in Iranian revolution. It is making its way back to American politics.
Thank you, Ali. Lisa, I'm going to come back to you. Somebody's asking, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but it comes with the territory.
Yes.
Why do you think American universities aren't fighting back on this movement and the conversion that you described goes back 20 and 25 years?
I'm so happy you asked, actually. I recently did a long investigative report on this, and it obviously goes back to the money. Everything about universities is about the money. Qatari checks are coming in, and with that comes, a whole long list of access points that they want. And that includes the talking points, and that includes picking the chairs of the department. Something that I just said in a talk I gave was that, when the Smith or Cohen family give money to a certain university, their name goes on the outside of the building. But when the Qataris or the Iran regime gives money, they go inside the building. They choose the professors. They choose the students who will receive scholarships. They come up with the talking points. And it's not just universities, by the way. Part of my reporting included K through 12 education. I mean, there's so much money and influence going into this endeavor, and it's worked. It's absolutely worked. When you look at young, whether it's students in college or even below that, they have a very skewed view of the United States. They're not proud of our foundations. They're not involved in civic engagement. They obviously are anti-Israel. They are anti-American, and it goes down the line. And this all has to do with this influence, this infiltration. To Ali's point, I think this part of this campaigning is the messaging. First, during 9/11 and the aftermath, the Iran regime started the campaign, which made Islamophobia a term. It actually made it a term. It wasn't a term before that. After that, they popularized this concept through op-eds and these so-called experts that come onto the major cable networks. It's not just the Nyack and Quincy. There are other individuals who are absolutely on the regime's payroll that will come on and say that the next talking points that they popularized was to say that the JCPOA, the nuclear deal, as well as the sanctions, are in accordance with the Iranian people's lives and livelihoods, and it's a national interest, and we can't put sanctions on the Iranian people. I remember when I started at Fox, this was a big point of contention, because I would talk about how targeted sanctions will help the Iranian people if they are targeted and well explained, and then you'd have a whole slew of these regime sympathizers come after me and say, how dare you as an Iranian advocate for sanctions against your own people? And that became the talking point. And nowadays I'm watching a few of these academics, PhDs, who are again on the regime's payroll, that are writing op-eds about how this 12-day war actually helped Iran, the regime, rally people around the flag, and how now the Iranian people are more supportive of their government. Lies. These are lies. So these are the op-eds that are getting published. These are the experts that are going on our cable news channel. So this is why. It's about money, influence, and access.
I want to mention, if I may, it's more. You mentioned Islamophobia. There was no such thing as Islamophobia. A phobia is an irrational fear of something, irrational. It is perfectly rational to fear these Muslim regimes, to fear even Islam and the way it's practiced, the way it's used. So I'm always offended by the term Islamophobia, because there is no such thing. There is a basis for us to have fear of these Muslim regimes.
But you know what? One more thing I want to add is how masterful they are at the political warfare, how masterful they are at these communications campaigns to actually take a regime that hangs gay people, right? Where you don't have freedom of religion. You can't, as a woman, you can't even go after someone who beat you. You can't divorce your husband unilaterally. You'll lose custody of your children. The value of a woman in Sharia law is half that of a man, and yet you have women's groups, leftist groups, all kinds of human rights groups supporting this regime and supporting its terrorist proxies. It's masterful what they have accomplished in such a short period of time because of this access.
How do you explain that? Are these people just, total fools?
Well, there's a step-by-step method to this process, and the first thing that they have done is to make young people skeptical, right? America's bad. If America's bad, therefore the aggressor is good, right? So if we're the ones who are trying to corner the Iran regime or Hamas or Hezbollah, they must be good because we're the ones who are bad. We're the colonists. We're the colonizers. We're the ones who are trying to not allow their freedom of expression. And it's so backwards the way that they have really framed this in a way that is palatable by young people. Again, we've said this and it's so cliche at this point, but take your blue hair, take your signs and go to Gaza and see how they treat you. Take your blue hair, go to Iran, land there, try to show your blue hair, and then report back if you can. So, it's just lost. And I think, again, it's about shaping narratives, and they have done a great job with all the money and all the access that they have had. And really I have an op-ed coming out this week that I will just tease here, but it talks about exactly this, how we as Americans gave up the American classroom because we didn't teach civic education. We didn't teach the Constitution properly. We didn't teach our students to be proud of the United States so that they would be impenetrable to these kinds of talking points.
And let me say, Lisa, let's never forget there's a good dose of Jew hatred involved in all this. So they use so this is certainly a factor, is Jew hatred, beyond ignoring and believing all the propaganda.
Yeah, and I think that there's a relationship there, right? Because if you hate America, you then hate America's main ally, and it's also another part of this, and I don't want to go on too long, but another part of this is really separating the family from each other, meaning the parents you're now skeptical against your parents, the ones who are paying the tuition of the school that you're going to be indoctrinated, and also separation of church. So studies have been shown the families where there is church involvement, there is, you don't have this, and it just goes across the board. You have a higher income, and you have more chances of having more children, and it goes down the line. But there is a process to all of this, and dismantling of what we know as American life, and that with that comes the acceptance of going down all the long list of things. You support gay rights, you support human rights, you support this, and you also have to hate Jews.
Lisa, I'm going to give you a few minutes to think about something, because I'm going to come back to you. I want to know what our listeners can do about what you're just describing. But I want to pull Ali back in. Ali, there are a couple of questions that I think are best addressed by yourself, and they're addressing international entities like Qatar, Turkey, and their relationship with Iran, and the existential threats and dangers to American Jews and Israel. And if you can also roll into that, there are reports that Germany is about to trigger the snapback sanctions mechanism from 2015. And I'd like to know if you think that's likely and what impact that will have.
Sure. I'll start with snapback, and then I'll go back to a point that Lisa mentioned about some aspect of the Iranian government and treatment of Jews inside Iran. With the snapback, it will be effectively, and I think at this point, people are perceiving it to be a done deal. It's just a question of timing. What is the snapback? The snapback was part of the so-called enforcement mechanism for JCPOA, which means that every member of JCPOA can go to United Nations, and if they go there and essentially they cannot get Iran cannot convince the United Nations that it is complying with JCPOA, the United Nations sanctions are going to be coming back. On one hand, theoretically, the United Nations sanctions are much broader. They are binding on more countries. On the other side, I think the sanctions under President Trump have been so effective that maybe the incremental pain of the snapback mechanism is not that much. And the Iranian government may need to feel more pain above and beyond the snapback sanctions if the essentially the expected outcome is a change in behavior. But that would put a lot of sanctions on the banking sector, and it might even strengthen internal strife within the different factions of the Iranian government, between the people who were inside the Iranian government that were pro-JCPOA versus people who felt it didn't benefit their faction too much. At the end of the day, it's a good tool for the sanctions, for the snapback mechanism to be triggered. You would argue that it was a joke, that it wasn't triggered in the first place many years ago when Iran started the missile program and President Trump rightfully withdrew from the JCPOA program. But it's better late than never. The big key point that would cause a change of behavior is continuation of what we were seeing during the 12-day war, which is taking out the senior military and political officials inside Iran. And especially like the same way that someone like Eichmann got punished for what they had done as part of Nazi Germany, members of the Iranian government should have that fear in them. There are many prominent Iranian government officials, maybe prominent is not the right word, high-ranking might be better, but the head of, that might deserve to be targeted in the next round of the conflict to cause a change in behavior. A few names come to my mind. One of them is a gentleman whose name might be not easy to pronounce for Americans, but his name is Mohseni Ejei. He's the head of the Islamic judiciary. I think every judge that for the past 45 years have been involved in prosecution of human beings inside Iran should be viewed a legitimate target. There is a gentleman named Ahmad Alamul Huda who is running a so-called Islamic charity which finances all of these activities inside Lebanon and inside finances the proxies, they should feel that their life is at danger if we want to get a change in behavior. There is a gentleman named Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, who is the member of IRGC and head of the Iranian parliament. He has been very much involved in repression, suppression, and human rights violation. And there is another gentleman, Ali Larijani, who is a close ally of the supreme leader and who is very much involved in the messaging and propaganda war. And there is a gentleman who is less well known, but is very much involved in setting up these proxies. His name is Mohammad Sadegh Kharazi. There are at least 5 people, and each category, if you dig in, there are more and more targets. And I think taking those people out is a lot more effective than snapback sanctions. I think snapback sanctions will go in, and I think Russia and China will not really stay in the way of them getting kicked in. But I don't know how effective snapback sanction will be versus taking out senior people who are affiliated with the Islamic judiciary or the Islamic Majlis or the Islamic charities that are part of the ecosystem of operation and financing terrorism.
I do want to remind you. Oh, sorry,
Ali,
Marty, go ahead.
The people, I disagree with you, Ali. The people you mentioned are not gentlemen. That's all I'm going to say.
Ali, I just want to remind you that you said that you were also going to dovetail on something that Lisa said about the Jews in Iran. Do you want to hit that?
Sure. I think I covered that because a lot of the people that I mentioned and members of Islamic judiciary were heavily involved in causing a lot of the people who left Iran to come to United States were left Iran because of those kind of judges, those kind of charities, those kind of politicians.
I missed that. Thank you. Lisa, I'm going to come back to you again because we're going to run out of time. You talk about this infiltration into the universities. What can the people that are listening to this webinar do proactively? Give us some advocacy advice.
You know, Dennis Prager, who is much smarter than I am, always talks about how the Jewish people and people who actually care about American values, until we stop valuing the Ivy Leagues and prominent universities, this will never be, we have to just stop kind of subscribing to the idea that this is where you want your child to end up. I don't know if I fully believe that, because I don't think anyone should surrender any institution because of hatred, bigotry, discrimination, and that's exactly what we're seeing. The main thing I always tell everyone, and I saw this with my own family with Rutgers after they canceled a talk I was supposed to give in 2018, was every time that they would call for a donation, you say, until this and this is not addressed, I will not be giving a penny to your university. And I know many Jews and friends of Jews are, they love to donate to universities and to libraries and to institutions that they believe are doing good work. If you believe that the institution that you give money to is not addressing this issue properly, then it's something you say before you write that check. And I think we have to use our leverage, at least the power of the pocket, as much as we can.
I'm going to ask you both to address one more question, and then we'll let everybody make closing remarks. I'm going to aggregate again 2 different questions. Do either of you feel that there is enriched uranium that was squirreled away, and is it accessible? And a similar question, one of our listeners is asking if you feel that Iran, rather than enriching their own uranium and creating their own bomb, would they purchase or procure a bomb from someone else that could provide that danger?
I'll be very brief. I will let Ali take this, but I think there is absolutely residual left or transported, because they designed this nuclear program at a snail's pace, because of a day like this that they knew would be coming. That is why we saw 12 sites. That's why we saw such the depth and the way that it was created underground with 13 feet concrete walls. They actually were creating it to be safe from, or not vulnerable to this kind of attack. The second issue is something that I've always feared, that China, Russia, Hezbollah, that they would help out, they come to their aid. But in the 12 days, we didn't see anyone come to the regime's aid, which was very eye-opening that they were completely isolated. They gifted 150,000 missiles to Hezbollah. Hezbollah has been so badly defeated that they didn't even fire one missile in support of the regime's campaign. China, Russia, mom was the word. I mean, the regime even thought about closing off the Suez Canal, and China just gave them one message: don't. And I thought that was very, very telling of, they may have this strange relationship of this access of kind of moving around Western isolation, but they actually are just in it for themselves. And I think China's tied up with their own interests and expanding their own influence, and Russia, of course, involved in their own catastrophes that they have to work out. So I'm not worried about that as much. But I will say one thing, and I've said this to the Israeli government when I brief them, I've said this to members of Congress when I brief them: when we're dealing with this regime, we should always work with the assumption that they either have the bomb or they're very close to it, even after this 12-day campaign. Because the very definition, Ali touched upon this and I touched upon it as well, the very definition of this regime is to have nuclear weapons in order to stay in power. So it's synonymous. If they're in power, they will be working towards a nuclear weapon and militarization, and they won't be working at a snail's pace at this point.
Thank you. Mort, do you want to make a couple of comments before I ask Lisa and Ali for closing comments?
Well, I would urge everyone in some small way that you can do to promote what is right about this terrible situation. Go on social media. I urge everyone, go on social media, do a few sentences, support America and Israel's war against Iran and against the Palestinian Authority and against Hamas. Go on Facebook, go on TikTok, all social media. Write letters to members of Congress. They monitor every single letter they get in Congress. Write a letter, 2 or 3 sentences enough, supporting what Israel and America is doing, and otherwise. Write an op-ed if you possibly can. Give talks at your churches or synagogues on these issues. Social media is filled with lies against Israel and lies about Iran in this situation. We need to fight back by exposing these lies and by promoting the truth on these issues. And I think it's important for all of us to demonize the Palestinian Authority, demonize the fact that they pay Arabs lifetime pensions to murder Jews. They spend $400 million a year paying people to murder Jews. When I speak in college campuses, the kids are shocked. No one knows about this. It's extraordinary. So I think we have to demonize the demons and fight back on social media against the lies of genocide, for God's sakes, the lies of apartheid, the lies of even a Palestinian state. Not only would it be a terrorist state, Israel's offered them a state 4 times in the last 20 years, 8 times in the last 80 years. The Arabs have turned it down each time. Why? Because they're required in these deals to say, we support Israel as a Jewish state. They say we will never do this. So we must fight back in the social media and wherever we can to make our voice heard for what's right and truthful, to oppose all the horrible propaganda.
Thank you, Mort. Ali, would you like to give some closing thoughts and comments?
Sure, absolutely. I'd like to end by saying the fact that Israel established itself as the dominant military power in the Middle East is a win for America as well, because it shows that essentially some credibility that was lost during the Afghanistan withdrawal, by showing that even as United States don't need to be involved directly, our allies are strong enough to defend themselves. It only gives credit to United States. So I view this as a win-win situation for Israel and United States. And my other closing remark is that, whether the Islamic Republic has enriched uranium or not is maybe at this point less important. They have the know-how, they have the technology, they can recreate that program anyway. So what is very important is, to the extent that there is a negotiated outcome, which I still see very unlikely, to have very clear enforcement mechanism, not what was in JCPOA. And to the extent that they are not willing to give up to that, the Iranian government needs to be punished by making sure that the decision makers who are torturing people inside Iran are fearful for their own lives.
Thank you, Ali. Lisa, closing remarks?
Yeah, I think it's very easy to feel outnumbered, outmaneuvered, outfunded by this movement and what's transpired. But what gives me optimism is the Abraham Accords, watching leaders in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Morocco, Bahrain, the list goes on, these more moderate Arab states who agree with us that Iran's regime should be stopped and therefore are a partner in allowing peace and prosperity and allowing Israel to live freely and safely in the Middle East. And working together with the West to ensure that happens, that we do have a future of prosperity for all those who want freedom in the Middle East, including the people of Iran, Israel, and all of these moderate Arab states. And we hope, we talk about the Cyrus Accords being, a throwback to the time of King Cyrus and the relationship between the Iranian people, the Israeli people, and hopefully one day we can go back to that. I love how the operation had lion in it, really a nod to the old Iranian flag. And showing support for the Iranian people. I think that was very important. And I encourage everyone to do something, like Mort said. I think everyone has a role in all of this. It doesn't matter if you have 5 followers or 500,000 followers. Everyone can write a letter, make a post, have some kind of voice in this, and also reach out to other partner groups. We've lost that. There's now voices inside the right wing and Christian communities that are against Israel and are bigger anti-Semites than the ones on the left. So let's reach out to the partners that we can. Many inside the African American community, the Hispanic community, Iranians like Ali. There's no one like Ali. He's really the best advocate. But there are many Iranians of many different ethnicities and religious backgrounds and other moderate Arabs who will work side by side the Jewish community to make sure that we have a safe and a stable future for the Middle East and Israel as well.
Let me just ask Dan Pollock, our Director of Government Relations in Washington, whether he had any comments about Congress and their feelings on the Hill or about any issue. As Director of Government Relations for the Zionist Organization of America, your thoughts are important.
Thank you so much. We're excited about the possibility of snapback. I agree with Ali completely about its relative worth, but it's an important step if it occurs. We're seeing in Congress general support for Israel, but there are these maddening equivalency where both sides should show restraint and things like that. And we're fighting that every day. So ZOA is continuing work for the organization on Capitol Hill. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to say so, Mort. But this was a great webinar, and I'm very proud of ZOA today.
And on that note, since we're at the end of the hour, I want to thank Ali and Lisa for sharing your insights, expertise. I know we can count on you both to help keep ZOA and our constituents well informed about developments in Iran and the global Middle East. We wish you both continued safety and success. And to you in our audience, thank you for joining us. Visit ZOA.org, consider a generous gift, and please do watch the video I spoke of earlier. It's in the chat. This ends the webinar. Everybody, I'm Yisrael Chai. Have a great afternoon.
I want to also add my thanks to Lisa Daftari and Ali Meli for giving us so much information. I learned so much. I assume everyone did. Thank you for your work. Continue it. God bless you. And thank God there are people like you around to promote the truth and fight back against the ugly, vicious propaganda that all of us endure. Thank you both for everything you're doing for us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having us.